Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Clearly Cloud podcast. I'm your host, Sean Spicer, joined here with our other host, Conrad Agramont. And today we're going to be joined by Dr. Jennifer Otter Bickerdike, who wrote the book, Why Vinyl Matters. And Conrad, vinyl isn't really a cloud technology, right?
Okay, maybe vinyl itself isn't. It's hard to get through the, little copper wires that way. But, music is a very popular form that goes over the internet and goes through the cloud. But it was a great discussion.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that conversation. And it is our first guest who talks about the cultural impacts of cloud and lots of name dropping. But if you want to hear all that, you got to stay and listen to our guest segment. So let's move to the news.
5, 4, 3, 2, bringing you some news.
Oh, another busy week in the news, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And for a lot of kids, it was the first day of school.
Not quite like it normally is. What's so funny is that even though there was a lot of kids going to school, including my own, that were doing it online, there was still, you cannot hold the parents back from taking that first day of school photo, the chalkboards, my first day of school, dressed up nice, backpack, and then back in the house they go.
Yeah, now our son starts school on Monday, and I have a feeling we're going to do the same picture thing. But this time it may just be in pajamas or underwear and a nice shirt.
Yeah, everybody's like well dressed because that's what we normally go to school. It's like, no, here somebody's got to do like the real one. Yeah, exactly. In pajamas, hair's messy. Like this is their first day of school.
Well, Zoom, it turns out, missed the first day of school. So on Monday at 6 a.m. Pacific time, so just as every kid is getting ready for school, trying to figure out what this is all going to be like for the first year remote, Zoom goes down for a large percentage of its users. And nobody knew what to do. So kind of missed the mark on that one.
I wonder if they run their own infrastructure. I'm not sure I even seen anything like that. I'm pretty sure they're probably doing their own kind of colo data center someplace. Might be a good time to start knocking on AWS or Microsoft Azure's door.
Yeah, well, the Brookings Institute has come out with a report this week stating that Zoom is now critical infrastructure. And that is terrifying because now we're relying on it for business meetings, for school, just for hanging out with friends. And because it is all consolidated into one platform, now we've got a vulnerability that we hadn't had to think of before. And it has a chilling effect on cybersecurity. And then in the same write-up they mentioned that when Zoom had claimed that they had end-to-end encryption, which they were using to position themselves against Teams, it turns out that they didn't have end-to-end encryption. They had transport encryption where Zoom could actually get in and see what was happening, which is the same encryption in Teams, which is what you want, because then you can actually have e-discovery, audits, information discovery. But yeah, I'm really just kind of surprised that Zoom missed the first day of school. But they didn't even have the worst week. I think Apple had the worst week. So we talked about it last week with Epic Games, and you kind of ribbed me saying, hey, why are we talking so much about games? And so one of the things that Apple has done is they have threatened to remove Epic entirely from their developer program, which would take out the Unreal Engine. And Microsoft, in a legal filing this week, said that this would be terrible for just about everybody. And Kevin Gamble of Microsoft Gaming Development Experience Division said, if Unreal Engine cannot support games for iOS and macOS, Microsoft would be required to choose between abandoning its customers and potential customers on iOS and macOS platforms or choosing a different game engine when we're preparing to develop new games. So when Microsoft shoots, a round over the bow, that's something to pay attention to. I'm really kind of curious to see what's going to happen over the next year in terms of Microsoft or Apple's various antitrust suits across the U.S.
Isn't it such a change? Where, many years ago, nobody would have thought would Microsoft come in and join the battle of the need to have these platform services that can and must run across different platforms. Like,
right?
Like how things have changed. Like they're the savior now of like, no, we have to be able to support things across multiple platforms. Where like 10 years ago, it's like, well, if it doesn't run on Windows, we don't care.
Right.
But it's actually pretty nice for Epic Games at least to have, Microsoft jump in the battle with them. I mean, what a friend indeed.
Yeah. And so this all started when Epic Games allowed in-app purchases without giving their 30% to Apple. And this is not allowed by their terms of service to be in the App Store. But Apple then went after WordPress and said, and WordPress is, if everybody knows WordPress, but WordPress is open source and free, but they offer professional support services through WordPress.org. And Apple said that WordPress had to build in-app purchases into its application in order to stay on iOS. And it's, that's not their model. That's not what WordPress is. And Apple came back with kind of a halfway apology saying, oh, we're fine. They're not going to have in-app purchases. They've removed the offending ability to purchase from their website. And it's what? And I think Apple's just got problems all over this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny with Apple. I mean, they're the think different company. They're the usually the scrappy underdog in the valley, and but they've just become this behemoth, and trying to, you get it. You're trying to protect the success they've had, but man, they've just been kind of on the wrong side for so many things this week. Yeah,
and then just in the deeper kind of cybersecurity corners of the internet, turns out that there is malware called XSET. And if you want to look for it, it's XCSSET. Again, we talked about this weeks before. Who names this stuff? But this malware can actually recognize when Apple's Xcode compiler starts to compile software and injects malware into the executable that's generated. And yeah. And there's a lot of interesting things it can do, but it also does data exfiltration once it finds a compiler and starts pulling cookies, tries to pull tokens for getting into GitHub and other repositories. It's a mess. But yeah, so if you're thinking about jumping from Unreal Engine to Xcode, you might want to make sure your antivirus is pretty strong.
Yeah, it's remember the days that are like, well, all the exploits and security things are on Windows. It's safer on Mac. It's like, well, normally hackers go after the bigger targets, and Mac or the Macs and iOS. I mean, they're huge targets now, and you're starting to see more and more of those exploits. Diving into the Apple land.
Yep. So also on the cybersecurity front, the National Security Agency director and head of the U.S. Cyber Command, Paul Nakasone, on Tuesday talked about how the U.S. is using a defend forward strategy. So it's no longer cyber defense, it's cyber offense. So we're really kind of at war. And so we actually sent a group on a mission to Montenegro, and there was Russian hacking, and it was partly about their elections. And the reason why we went there in order to defend and support them was so that we could learn more about the hacking groups that were doing it, so that we could be more proactive about our own posture. So it's really interesting to see that we are not just waiting to be defensive, but we are actively working towards it.
I mean, the acts of war, back in the day when, you could really see when the war stuff was happening, like, I don't know, sticking rockets on Cuba. Like, hey, that's an attack. And now you don't even, you don't have to leave Russia or wherever the attacks are coming from to really, make a big difference on like elections or whatever else is going on.
Yeah, and that's the whole idea about advanced persistent threats. So there's a small group in North Korea called the Beagle Boys, and they have robbed nearly $2 billion from banks around the world. And that report came out this week. But another report came out. And so a North Korean advanced persistent threat group has been creating spear phishing attacks against LinkedIn users that work at Bitcoin companies. And they'll go in and they'll look at their experience. They'll create a job posting that looks exactly like this person's experience. Like, this is your job, man. Let me send you more information about this job opportunity. And then they send them over a Word document, and the Word document has a macro that looks like it's data loss protection. And so you have to enable the macro in order to be able to see this job posting. And when you click on the macro, now this IT guy at a Bitcoin company has just compromised his computer, and they're going after wallets.
Oh, goodness.
Yep. Very clever. But that's it. Just don't click anything ever.
I was going to say, it continues to be the biggest weakest link is always going to be people.
Always.
Just attack them in some interesting way. And it's tough because you're just a person trying to do your job. And well, in this case, if somebody's trying to leave a job, but you just got to still attack them. It still seems to be the softest attack vector.
Yeah. And no, there's no blame laid on this one yet. Nobody knows who's doing it. But the New Zealand government had to call in its national cybersecurity services this week because the New Zealand Stock Exchange has been offline and ceased trading for 4 days because of a DDoS attack. And talking about the weak link being people, the reason why these gigantic DDoS botnets came about is just tons of people buying like smart light bulbs and home assistants that aren't vetted and aren't secured, and not securing routers, leaving default passwords. And hackers, they're not looking for a big payday from the individual user. What they're looking for is, can I compromise 100,000 machines that I can then use to mobilize DDoS attacks? And on the dark web, you can hire people to come in, or not hire people to come in, but you can hire botnets to perform DDoSs. And late last year, the FBI actually arrested about 4 different purveyors of DDoS services on the dark web.
Wow.
But I would be surprised if this is not a nation state that's messing with New Zealand. It might be us. We're probably just mad about the fact that New Zealand beat COVID.
Dang you.
Yeah, your economy's fine. We'll fix that.
Turn all your routers into spies.
All right. Well, that about wraps it for the news. I'm not going to get into TikTok. TikTok's a big mess as it is. Nobody knows what's going on. Is Oracle going to get it? Is Walmart and Microsoft, are they going to join forces? We just have to wait and see. But I think that's going to be another big shaping point in terms of the things we talked about in our first and second episodes about international residency of data. But I think we're going to wait for the courts to come out with a decision on that one.
I don't know. When you brought that up, all I could think about was, will Oracle buy them? Will Marty do these things? This and more on the next episode of Soap.
It really does get to be that way. I mean, we've been talking about Apple and Epic now for 3 episodes, and it just keeps getting juicier and juicier and juicier.
I think I'm just showing my age. I wonder if anybody's going to comment back. Like, I remember that show, Soap.
Yeah, there are a lot of age-old references we've thrown back and forth this morning already.
I love it.
It's the moose and the squirrel.
The moose and the squirrel. I can't help but think every time there's a cybersecurity thing going on, every single time, do you want to play a game?
Well,
yes, Dr. Falcon.
Well, talking about old school, let's put the needle on the record. And the drum beats go like this. Let's move on to the guests.
4, 3, 2, 1, having some fun with guests.
Right, and today we are joined by another dear friend of mine, Jennifer Otter Bickerdike, who wrote this great book. She's actually, I'm going to let her introduce herself. I just want to precede this with, she's one of the coolest and smartest people I know. How are you doing today, Jen?
Wow. That's a great introduction. I don't know how I'm going to live up to that. I'm doing just fine. The sun is kind of out here in London and England, and that's all we can ever hope for in this dreary country.
Jen, I'm starting to find out that I'm really enjoying the podcast, and thank you so much for joining us. But I kind of feel like this is a way for Sean to fish out some of his old friends. What's up with that?
Well, you know what? Clearly, it's just people that he knows. He's like he's like lost touch with. He's like, how can I like get back to them without looking like a total jerk? Like, it's me. Don't talk to you in 20 years. You're super interesting.
Come join my podcast.
Come join my podcast. It's really cool. But you know what? Like, to be fair to Sean's always been that person that he's like undercover, the smartest person in the room. And it's totally disgusting because it's like this cute guy that's like, you know, cheeky and has great musical taste. And you would never think if you just saw him like cruising around, but he's like an uber brain. And especially when I knew him in the Silicon Valley, that's why it was really hilarious because we're living in like tech central and all these, you know, tech freaks think that they're the smartest one, but really Sean Spicer is there crushing them with his huge brain.
Hold on. You're the guest, Jen, not me. And it's really hard for me to not call you Otterpop. So
you could totally call everybody totally calls me Otterpop. I mean, not everybody, but like everybody from San Francisco. So that's totally cool.
Well, I think one of the emails I sent you, I called you Dr. Pop.
Dr. Pop. Yeah,
Dr. Pop.
Yeah.
So the term work wife is that person you work with all the time. And for 3 or 4 years, Jen, we shared a DJ booth where you and I ran the back floor every Saturday night at the Cat Club.
We did. I mean, looking back on it, first of all, thank you for putting up with me because the amount of alcohol, I'm like, who was that person? Like the amount of alcohol and just angst and despair. And like, it's like I was a teenager all over again. I don't know why that back room harkened that for me, but that was a really, really fun time. And I'm so happy that we got to do that. And it was great to do it with you.
And yeah, back then,
Conrad, that was like a little therapy session. I'm so sorry.
It really was. I mean, it's so comfortable. There's so much that comes out of this podcast. We just don't know what's going to happen.
So at the time, you had been working it was Universal, correct?
I'd been working at Interscope, Geffen A&M.
Interscope, that's right.
Yeah. Running marketing for the 17 Western states of the U.S.
Wow. And this was during the era where MP3s were really coming into play. And the future of the music industry was, I wouldn't say uncertain, but there was definitely a lot of possibility and a lot of changes happening. What was that like?
It was, you know what, it was really strange because I think I came in really at that last kind of gasp when huge amounts of product, when I mean product, I mean amounts of CDs, in particular were being sold. So you have some of the fastest selling albums of all time, like Backstreet Boys and Limp Bizkit. Limp Bizkit's still the fastest selling rock record of all time. It sold 1.7 million copies in a 24-hour period in the United States when it came out.
Wow.
So you have that happening. And you also have like the whole thing with the little record stores going away. It was like this weird kind of perfect storm because, I mean, I remember I lived in San Francisco, but my job, I'd go to LA all the time. And I remember talking to people in Los Angeles, like the big bosses, people that are household names in the music industry saying this MP3 thing, like there's this thing called a liquid audio player. And I had a friend that was like the first time I saw an MP3. You had to like download this liquid audio player onto your computer and then play MP3s. And there weren't very many MP3s around at that time, but I remember showing that to different people at Interscope and then being like, oh, that will never touch us. So you have that happening. And then you also have, it used to be Tower Records was, the big powerhouse. And then you'd have these independent stores like an Amoeba or down in Los Angeles, Aaron's Records, for example. It's no longer there.
I worked at Rhino Records.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
totally know the local record stores.
Is that Claremont? Is that what that Rhino was? Yeah. So you have stores like that really created kind of the local subcultures, or kind of like, if you would, the nexus of what was happening with youth culture, new music, art, everything in those areas. And what happens at this exact same time when these MP3s are coming up is you have places like Costco, places like Walmart. They're called big box retailers, and you have them buying product from the record companies at a loss. So let's say that the Sean Spicer's Let's Get Sexual CD, the price for Costco to bring it in is £8, right? And it'll be the same £8 for Aaron's Records to bring it in. But Costco they decide they're going to sell it at £5. So they're losing, sorry, pounds. I should be saying dollars. Sorry. But you know what I'm saying? So it costs $8, but they sell it to the consumer at $5. And the idea is that because it will be kind of like the little like candy to get the consumer into the store. And then once you're in Costco, you're going to need something like a TV or a washing machine or a big ticket item that comes in a big box. Does that make sense? So
yeah, loss leaders.
Yeah, loss leaders, exactly. So suddenly, Aaron's Records can't compete in volume. They can't compete in price. They can't compete in all these different areas. And you have that happening at the same time when you have things like Napster coming up, again, like MP3 technology, people being able to burn CDs to their computers. All these things are happening, creating this perfect wave, kind of culminating in where we are now.
I used to buy a ton of CDs. Like when I was in the Marine Corps, I was in Okinawa, and there's just not a lot to do with your money except either drink it or buy junk. And for me, I bought a lot of music, and so I bought a lot of CDs. But years later, when I was, back at home out of the military, and Napster came out, I still bought the same number of CDs. What I really liked from Napster is I could find music I couldn't find anymore.
Oh.
Right? Like you couldn't order it. You couldn't find it, but somebody stick it on Napster and you're like, oh my God, there's that album. Like I can't find it. Can't even order if I wanted to.
Conrad, you should have been in the back room with me and Sean, because I'd be like I'll never forget like going on LimeWire and I found Juicy by Oaktown 357. And I got it into the back room. I'm like, Sean, I have Oaktown 357. And it's like Sean and I are the only people like, it's one of those things you have to be really, really drunk, or you can only play it right when you go on because nobody will be excited about it but you. And it never sounds as good as you remember. It hardly ever does. But I was right there with you, Conrad. I'll never forget finding that. I was like, yes! So,
yeah, and that's one of the things that I really loved about the ability to get music from the internet is I was able to find so many artists that may not have even had vinyl out. Mm-hmm. That it was like, a local artist. And so I was really in with the Anticon guys, record label out of the Bay Area. And that was I could never play that at Rocket. That would just immediately kill dance floors, songs about like God and just crazy stuff. But what I found, though, is that a lot of those bands that I really liked that were digital, like Cobra Commander came out in like 2001, 2002, you can't get any of their music anymore, because the only place to get it was off of their website. And then the band broke up and there was nobody to upload it to Spotify or wherever you're doing your streaming from. And we've lost this whole chunk of about a decade of independent artists because there wasn't vinyl. There weren't CDs. So if you didn't burn it and you lost a hard drive or something, it's gone.
I mean, it's so true. I mean, one thing, I can't remember if it's in the book that you have there, the Why Vinyl Matters, but I remember talking to Luke McFadden, aka Chemist, and he said, you never go, ooh, like, let me share it. Let me have your hard drive, or let me like flip through your iTunes. Like if you have that physical record tape, 8-track, whatever it is, you can physically still, in most cases, it might be warped, but you still get the music off of it. And I think what you're talking about is a disposability and an erasing almost of an entire decade and history of music. But which is something that I think is problematic across a lot of different areas when we start living in a digital way for the most part, I think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves.
So we haven't mentioned for our readers yet that you wrote this amazing book, Why Vinyl Matters. And that was going to be one of my first questions about that. And I think we're getting into it, is why vinyl matters.
I was interested. I mean, I can't lie to you. You know the core of who I am. And it's like, when I DJ'd 99.9% CDs. I can't imagine with the amount of gin I was drinking then. I don't think I could have managed to do vinyl at the same time. But I have to say, like during the 90s, going into the early 2000s, I still bought a lot of vinyl. And really not to play, but just more to have. Like I went through this weird, and it was cheap to get as well. Like I remember going to Streetlight Sean on Market, and I bought like 8 or 10 Madonna 12 inches for like $1 each. And those same 12 inches are now like 25 to 30 each on Discogs. So I was able to snap up a lot of music. But the reason I did the Why Vinyl Matters, honestly, is because, and Sean, you'll appreciate this, because I had a literary agent at the time, and I kept saying to her, I'm like, we need to do a book on yacht rock. I'm like, I'm sorry, I know you hate it. She was like a total goth. I'm like, I know you hate it, but Hall Notes are amazing. The Doobie Brothers, amazing. I'm like, I'm from Santa Cruz. Let me tell you, that's the good stuff. And she's just like, meh. And so I'd started bringing her like LP covers when we'd have meetings, and I'd be like, look at this cover of Hall & Oates H2O. And it's the cover of the record, it's like a picture of their heads sweating. And I was like, isn't it great? And she was like repulsed. She's like, you should just write a book on, she's like, you should just write a book called Why Vinyl Matters. And I was like, oh, it was totally like a TV commercial. Like, you put your chocolate in my peanut butter. Like, I'm like, ooh, Why Vinyl Matters. Yeah. So that's how it came to be.
Well, I love it. It is great. I have been having a great time going through and reading it. So you interviewed some legends, and I don't want to call you out as being a fangirl, but I know you can't lie.
Huge fangirl.
You interviewed Cut Chemist, Fat Mike from NoFX,
hilarious,
Fat Freddy, Fatboy Slim. Who were you most excited about?
I don't want to say this because Luke will kill me. I wasn't that excited to interview Cut Chemist just because he's like you, like old friend. But it was exciting to hear his stories, how he first got into it as someone that's such an amazing artist and DJ and creative. That it was interesting to talk to him in that way instead of as a friend. The first interview, I have to tell you this, I've said this before in other interviews, but I just always want to mention it because I think it's a good thing to pay forward. When I started writing the book, I hadn't been working in the music business in probably like 5 or 6 years, which in music business time, that's like a century. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I'd been getting my PhD. And so a lot of my connections I didn't have really anymore in the same way. So literally what I did, Sean, you're right. I'm a total fangirl. Like, I wrote out a list. I'm like, who would I want to meet? That was literally the thing. Who would I want to meet? Who would I want to know what they thought about records? And that's how it started. So the first person I reached out to, I somehow found Henry Rollins' email address online. And I just sent him an email. I'm like, hi, you don't know me. I'm a random. And he really convincing. And so he wrote me back actually really quickly and was like, you know what? I'm not going to give you an interview now because you don't have a deal, but you can tell people that I'm attached to your project. And that was just, wow. I thought that was just so generous and amazing. Like, he doesn't know who I am. I'm just some freaky weirdo that out of nowhere is asking him for something. And that was just that he changed my life. Like, I will thank Henry Rollins in everything I ever do, because literally that was pivotal to like me going down this path I'm on. And that was because of him.
That's awesome.
Amazing. And Henry Rollins is amazing. I mean, just all of the different transformations he's gone through, from Black Flag to spoken word to, I saw a business video from him on LinkedIn. He was talking at some conference and talking about the work ethic of punk, and he's just so literate.
He's one of those people that, like, I wouldn't say like I would never in a million years say I'm friends with him, but I've talked to him quite a bit, like on email, and like I don't think I can meet him in real life because it will just be like literally you guys are gonna laugh. I mean, Conrad, like when Sean was being kind,
just ruins it.
Yeah, it ruins it. I mean, Sean was being nice, but I'm a fangirl. I'm like an uber nerd. Like, I have a Henry Rollins folder in my mail inbox, and like the emails, I'm making it sound like there's these like long soliloquies to me. The emails would be like, "Hey Jen, great to hear from you. Yeah, no problem. I'll do whatever it is you're asking." I'm like, "Oh my God, I got email for you." You know what I mean? So yes, I do love him. I have so much respect for him, and I just think, what a great human. And I try to have some of that humility and generosity, and like, when people that need mentoring or help, if I can do it, if it's not going to detract from me, then why not? You know what I mean? Like, it definitely, he changed my life, and I'm so thankful. But that didn't answer your question. Your question was, what was my favorite interview to do? But I do have a really funny story about doing the Fatboy Slim interview. So that one was like back and forth with management, back and forth. And finally they're like, okay, you can go to Norman's house and interview him. And I was like, oh my God, you know, 'cause I'm a nerd. And I just gotten my driver's license in the UK, right? So where he lives is like an hour and a half from where I live in London. I gave myself, you guys, 4 hours to get there. Okay. I'm like, I'm all this way. If I get lost, I can go slow if there's traffic. Okay. So I pull up to his house literally like over 2 hours early. Okay. And I'm sitting there going, okay, I made it. It was like my first solo drive by myself. You know what I mean? And as I'm sitting there going, I made it. I can drive in the UK. Literally, Fatboy Slim pulls up in his Mini Cooper and like looks at me like directly into my eyes, like through our car windows. And I'm like, oh no, I look like a weird stalker. And I just sat there frozen in my car seat. And then he comes and gets out of the car and he walks over and he taps on the window. And I like roll the window down. It's like, and I'm all, hello. And he's all, are you Jennifer Otter? And I said, yes. And this is the scary part, Sean. He goes, I've seen your videos online.
Uh-oh.
Whoa.
Exactly. I was just like, oh my God, what video? I'm like sitting there thinking, what boyfriend has my husband been doing? You know, but I said, I just explained to him, like I gushed. I'm just like, I'm so sorry. I just got here so early. I just got my license, la, la, la. And he's like, no, come on in. So get in and like, he's just like, do you want a latte? Do you want like sparkling water, still water? I'm just like, oh my God. So he goes and like leaves me in his like living room by myself with like a multitude of drinks while he goes and takes a shower because he's got back from the gym. And I'm just sitting there like arms and like feet on the floor, arms just like glued to my side going, oh my God, I'm just sitting in Fatboy Slim house. Like, what do I do? Do I like call somebody? What do I do? Like I was by myself for like 15 minutes and like, I just like it was the most bizarre thing. And then he came out and like he and I got along like a house on fire. Like I was there for like 3 hours. We were just talking and he ended up taking me over. He owns the house next door to his house and it's like a studio. And Sean, oh my God, his room of vinyl. There's a picture of it, I think, in the book. You can see some of it.
Yeah.
But it's just, oh, it's so cool. It's so awesome. And just being able to sit there and go, I'm sitting here looking out, and his house is right on the sea. I'm sitting here chopping it up, fighting about Fleetwood. He hates Fleetwood Mac. Fighting about Fleetwood Mac with someone that created like modern dance music in so many ways. It was just completely insane. So
yeah, and one of the things is, so I really like the juxtaposition between Cut Chemist and Fatboy Slim. Because Cut Chemist, you asked him about like the resurgence of vinyl, and Cut Chemist, he's just kind of like, oh, because people think it's hip.
Yeah, yeah.
And Fatboy Slim seemed a little bit more emotionally and nostalgic about it, but he's pure digital now.
Yeah, he's still that.
You talked.
Yeah, sorry, keep going.
Well, you talked about the fact that you DJ digital, and I would come in occasionally with records. But what I would do is I would buy records and then I would download them and burn them for the same thing that Fatboy Slim said was he didn't want to take his records out and get them ruined because he had 3 copies when he first started out of everything, 2 to scratch and remix off of, and then 1 to keep.
Yep. Yeah.
And I thought that was really telling.
Do you know what was weird? And like, I wish I could, it's been a couple of years since that I was at his house, but I remember like in his, like where he has the vinyl, you know how if you go into like not like a grandparent's room is not the right thing, but like a disused room, you can tell it has that kind of musty smell, like it's not used very much. Like he literally said, like as we walked into where all the records were, he's like, this is like a time capsule from 1997, 98. And it's like the different like ephemera that was around, like pictures of like Zoe Ball. I have to say something funny about his wife, but pictures of like Zoe Ball and like knick-knack paddywhacks that were up on the wall. And it smelled, you could tell it was an archive. It was not a place that was used all the time versus where he works all the time has like stuff all over it and hard drives. And we were laughing because I can't remember if this is in the book or not. He had floppy disks. He's all, do you remember these? Whee! And so that was really fun, but this is really funny. So that was, I think, a Friday, and Saturday, my husband and I go to the grocery store. And I'm like in the produce aisle, getting stuff. And James comes running up to me, and he's holding like the newspaper, and he's like, "What did you do?" And on the headline is that Fatboy Slim broke up with his wife. And I'm like, yeah, I have the powers. I have the powers. I'm too sexy for this world.
He saw your videos.
He saw my videos.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I really liked him. I mean, to be fair, I think the interview is there was one interview in particular that was a little bit rough. And there were a couple that were like, everybody was very nice, but there were like, people have asked me that a lot. Like, what was your favorite one? And it's like, as I did some of them, I'm like, this is my favorite one. But then the next one, it's like, I'm so fickle. The next one would happen. I'm like, oh, that's my favorite one. You know what I mean? Because
that's a sign of somebody doing what they love.
Oh, thank you. I was just saying, the thing is, because you're talking to someone about like common ground that you have. So I'm not sitting there as like a journalist, and they're not the celeb. It's like you're two nerds that like vinyl, Right. So, I mean, like in the book, there's a little snippet of it, but when I interviewed Gaz Coombs from Supergrass, he and I had this like half an hour, I kid you not, talk about Madonna and like how Madonna should be aging, how it must be hard to be Madonna. And like, if she did now, this is so obvious now, she looks like Pete Burns from Dead or Alive. She's had so much plastic surgery, but, it was just, we were just nerding out, you know what I mean? And like, I left going, I would totally hang out with that guy if he like lived near me, So.
Yeah, I really liked his interview too, because you mentioned what the secondhand price was for Supergrass albums.
Yeah.
And he had no idea that his albums were going for $200 and $300.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was like, well, wait, I've got 20 copies of that. Reach out to me. I could use some money.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then Matt Mike had the same thing as well, because you were talking to him and asked him what the most expensive piece of vinyl he had was. And he's like, well, I'm sure some of my stuff is worth a lot. I pay store prices, though. I don't really go out and collect. And it shocked me because he said the most expensive piece of vinyl he has is Multiplication Rock.
I love that. That was another one where I'm like, okay, like you and I see eye to eye, my friend. That interview was interesting because I've met him and run into him, but it wasn't like I knew him, from being in San Francisco. And one of my friends, someone I was close with at the time when I did that interview, he was a massive Fatboy Mike fan. And so I let him hear the interview like in its naked form before I edited it. And he said that he had not heard him talk so openly about stuff in very many instances. So that made me feel good about that interview. He was really funny. I really, really liked him because you can tell like his whole persona is like being outrageous. And I think the true Mike is the person that, celebrates Multiplication Rocks. Like that's who he really is, I think, underneath the bravado.
Well, I mean, the front man for NoFX and Me First and the Gimme Gimmes, I wouldn't expect anything but humor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like, both very, very fun, irreverent bands. So this is interesting talking about all of these musicians, many of which I've seen live. And we're in the middle of this global pandemic, and you and I both being in nightclubs, we have a lot of friends that work in the live music industry that are just getting crushed right now. And then a lot are transforming and going, and they're streaming on Twitch, they're putting up YouTube channels and things like that. How do you think that's going to affect everything once we're able to finally go out to venues again? Do you think there's going to be streaming for live shows in the future when this is over? Or?
Could I give a shout out to the best nightclub in the world, by the way?
Yeah.
Am I allowed to do that? Shout out to the Cat Club! Woo! San Francisco! Sorry, just had to do it. I think to me, the scariest thing, and again, this is, I've been interviewed about this before, and it's kind of like, there's this weird kind of thing, this fine line between being like an old fuddy-duddy and being like, was it like this when I was young? And really trying to hold on to something that is of value, just because something new comes in does not mean the old should be thrown away. And I do think a lot of the Twitch and a lot of the live streaming stuff, I think that will be a component alongside the evolution that we're seeing of the live music experience, whether that is a nightclub or whether that is a live show. However, I think the scary part to me is that kids like your son's age, for example, this is the longer this goes on, the more and more this will be normality to them. And so the non-normality will be going out to a club, going out to a live show, and they're growing up in in kind of this like bog of fear. I mean, I never had, the only thing I was ever fearful of at the cat club is that I'd make out with someone horrendous and not remember it the next day. You know, I never.
Well, the good part is if you don't remember it.
Oh my God, there's at least twice I can remember people, like these grim people coming up to me like the next week being like, hey, and I'm like, oh my God, get away from me. And they're like, you don't remember me? I'm like, ah, anyway. But that fear for like your health and safety, like that's something you actually have to think about. That to me is really sad. There's nothing like being out at I mean, I remember one of the first shows I went to, it was just like, something happens at a live gig or when you're at a nightclub and you're all dancing to this one song and you're just, you transcend beyond yourself. And that is something that you cannot get from a computer, period.
And there's that eclectic moment at a live show, be it a band or a DJ, just the energy of the crowd. Mm-hmm. And I thought it wasn't in your book, but it was an interview with Fatboy Slim that was in Mix Mag, 20 years ago. And he talked about the big difference about at a live show, people are focused on the band, but at a rave, people are focused on each other.
Ooh, I like that.
I miss that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the other thing is there's also the accessibility so every week, my son and I, we sit down, we eat dinner with DJ Z-Trip and watch him spin a live set. And he's too young to go out to the places where he'd spin. But he still gets to hear all of this great music. And so I think there's an accessibility factor. But what worries me is the MySpace effect, or even worse, the Friendster effect, is we're creating all this culture online and we're all able to access it in the cloud. But in 5 years' time, when Twitch goes to the way of Napster, where does all of that media and culture go?
God, sorry, I would die to get back on my Friendster account. Can you imagine what is on there? That's like going back. Oh God! I mean, the Friendster times where I remember that was when I just had left Interscope and I was doing my own like consulting company, and I had an office in Lower Haight, and this is when Lower Haight was still a little bit dangerous and dirty, and we had, get ready for this, boys, a dial-up. So it was me and my best friend. We had a dial-up internet connection, and we, instead of doing work, we'd spend most of the day looking for boys on Friendster. but I mean, what you're talking about there is like a disposability as well, though, because there's no permanent, there's no physical entity to these, whatever it is you're creating, whether it's a group of people, whether it is a piece of music or a blog. There's no physicality to it. So there's nothing to go back and reference. That's really what you're talking about there. There's nothing to go back and replicate if that particular platform goes away. And that, I think. Right. And
I was going to say, that, I mean, isn't that the same thing? Like, you know, I don't buy a lot of movies anymore because I'm like, oh, I got Netflix, whatever's on there, and I just pay for it. But every month when I had access, I watched it. But if Netflix if I just stop paying for Netflix, I have nothing, right?
But Conrad, in that instance, it's funny. I don't have, the other day, actually, my husband and I realized we don't have a CD player in the house. We don't have a DVD player in the house, but I don't have, do you remember coming, did you come to my house, Sean? I can't remember.
Yeah.
I had like 10,000 CDs in that house, right? I think I have maybe like 100 CDs now. Like that's how dramatically I cut back, but I still have some, and I still have some DVDs, and it's like, I don't want to be without specific movies. I don't want to be able to never access The Gift by Jane's Addiction again. And what you're talking about, what you're talking about there, Conrad's interesting, because if it was that important to you to actually own that thing and always be able to have access to it, you would own it. But because movies are probably as important to you as music, do you see what I'm saying? It's like having the access to whenever, like the physicality is not important to you. That is how. Yeah. That's how physical records and tapes and CDs are to a lot of kids now. And perhaps
I was gonna say it's kind of like, but now there's this inherent trust that we all have put on just the put your big arms around the internet, right? Because you don't know which player is gonna win, but you're like, I don't know if like maybe Amazon Prime creates a magical movie and everybody goes there and gets off of Netflix, like. There's going to somebody's going to find some way to get that content to me. And if it's on Spotify, like Taylor Swift wasn't on there. Now she is on there. She's all about it. At some point the musical gods will will make sure that there will be some service in the world, in the internet, that will deliver the joy of the goodies that I want from them. So that way there's always somebody for me to pay that $15 a month to, so I can get access to all of it.
As long as there's not a copyright takedown. And so we also,
but there it is.
We give up the rights to having whatever music we want. So Jen, you're going to love this. You know how much I loved Uneasy Listening. I managed to get a copy of Z-Trip's Uneasy Listening, the 4-record set on clear vinyl, signed. There were only 1,000 of these made, and I've got number 327.
Has it ever been played in your house?
Has it ever been played in my house?
Yeah. Or are you just like, this must be kept? Yeah, I was going to say, this has to be kept in the plastic.
Well, no, I actually asked him to take it out of the plastic and sign the cover.
Oh.
And he did a 2-layer drawing where, as you take it out of the slip, he's drawn like faces on the cover, but he actually signed the message on the cardboard.
Oh.
Because I said, you know what? I'm going to be playing this. And I know what happens to the plastic, the slip. It gets torn up. And I don't want that to go away. Can you please sign the cardboard?
That is so cool. I love that. I'm stoked you have that. That's really awesome.
But you can't get it on Spotify.
No.
You can't listen to it on YouTube. It is a completely illegal album. It's like the Grey album from Danger Mouse. If you can find that, it's amazing.
Something that Conrad said, there was that kind of almost like Big Brother effect. This is totally a different thing. But like, I remember thinking, and we're going back to like early 2000s here, I was just like, if all the artists got together and band together and said, we are going to take control. We're not giving control to record labels. We're going to have control of whatever it is, whether it's having health insurance or it is the amount of promotional copies of our stuff that we get charged back or whatever it is. And it always surprised me that the artists and we as consumers have put so much faith in the record labels. And it's kind of what you're saying right now, Conrad. Like we're just kind of like, we accept as things go along, whatever's easiest and convenient. We don't think about the ramifications. And Sean's bringing up some of the ramifications of letting what do you call it, Goliath, put their arms around us and give us what we want without thinking about the longer term impact of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's started with like radio, right? I mean, just music distribution. Like, how can you get on there? And, it's the whole machine to get there. Then who can afford and do concerts and stick out vinyl or CDs and DVDs but it seems to be getting easier now. I think the thing that, and again, it's not all people. Like, I think part of the three of us are here probably a bit eclectic in the music that we like, but most people want somebody to have pre-filtered out the songs that are terrible and say these songs are nice.
Yeah.
These songs fit a genre, and they are the ones. So that's why you see the same songs on the top 10, the top 100. There's like 5% difference every week. People need time to adapt to it, learn to like it. Me, I hear a song, I'm like, yep, I like it. 3 months later, everybody's like, have you heard this song? Like, man, that was 3 months ago. Liked it when I heard it. You needed to hear it 20 times. Repetition. Anyway, I'm going off. But yes, this is what I mean.
But what's frightening to me is a couple of years ago, I was, I've not seen this person since because I was so mortified. I went to lunch with someone that's fairly high up at Spotify, and I was just asking them just different questions about this, that, and the other. And they said to me, we don't care about artists or artist career. We care about playlists and how many streams each track gets. And to me, that is like that artists and their creativity and their mental health, and how you can have an artist have a long trajectory and a career making something like an album or inspiring people. That's the most important thing. And the fact that one of the most powerful companies in the music business right now doesn't care about that is we're just creating basically a boneyard of what you're talking about disposable music that 3 months from now, you won't remember. You know what I mean? And it sounds, and there's no cultural anchor to it whatsoever. It doesn't really belong in a scene. There's no real value. When I mean value, it's like when the three of us say Biggie or Tupac, you immediately, without really us having to talk about it, you know exactly what the ethos is for each of those two individuals and what their songs mean and their legacies mean. We're not really having that in the same sort of way because there's not that backstory. There's not even an LP. There's a single for these artists. And that's really sad, I think.
Yeah, and this takes me back to something that was in the book, and you mentioned your interview with Henry Rollins. And as you were talking about that, I remembered something he said, and I had to look it up. And it's, what do you hope to get when you pull the album out from its sleeve? A coupon for a free Pepsi? Some music is merely an advertisement for what music can be, and it never escapes the enclosure of its commercial goals, nor does it seek to. And a future where that's the only music available is terrifying to me.
Yeah. I agree.
You cringed because he said that about Beyonce.
Yeah, well, I agree with it. I mean, I was on a call. You're asking about the live music industry, and I was on a call on a webinar the other day, and the person I was interviewing was saying how the kind of the way things are going. There's this idea of avatars being standing in for you at a live stream concert. Mm-hmm. And this whole like video game merging of video game with live events. And it was funny because I was interviewing him and someone else at the same time on the webinar, and it was on Zoom. So the other person that was on the call was like chatting with me in Zoom, and she was like, "Oh my God." She's like, "I don't want to be in a world where an avatar is attending a virtual concert." And that's kind of what you're talking about. You're talking about something doesn't really exist, but then does that not exist because you and I grew up in the 80s, or, for like your kid, will that be existing? You know what I mean? Like they don't have that. They're digital natives. They don't have that break in the same way that we do between physical and virtual. So, I
mean, literally, this is the movie Ready Player One.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh no. Oh no.
It literally.
I'm taking their mojo.
Yeah, no. Yeah, you watch this Steven Spielberg movie, but it was, people in their lives aren't really as connected. Everybody's digitally connected, and they go to if they really want to hang out, they party and everything, but it's through virtual reality.
It's so sad.
Yeah. Plus a lot of good 80s. I think
we're definitely getting down to that PhD tip. But Marshall McLuhan talked about the Gutenberg Age, which was the age of books, and then we move into the age of information. And I think we saw that with the transference from vinyl, which was a very book medium, very physical, where the music was imprinted in grooves, to CDs, where it was data. And now it's this ephemeral, it's in the cloud. I don't know what it means, but it's something to ponder. What do you think it means, Jen?
I mean, it goes back to the thing. It's like, are we just old, or things keep moving on? And this is one of the things that me and Fatboy Slim sat and talked about. It's like, he's like, you cannot always be hearkening back to the past. But I do think that, I just think for me, like books and art and music and movies and all these things we're talking about, all those things were like formed a lot of who I am and helped me navigate the world. And I'm not saying you're not going to be able to have those in the same way, but on the same time, it's like, the fact that you and I both like hip hop and we can nerd out about this, that, and the other. And if you wear, like, I'm just making this up, obviously, if you wear a Nelly t-shirt without the Band-Aid on his face, I'll be like, what? You know what I mean? Like there's certain signs and symbols that you pick out your tribe. And I think without having those, you see people walking around with Ramones t-shirts or Joy Division t-shirts. It's just they just think it looks cool, but they don't know the underlying value to it. That part scares me. And I think, all you need to do is, if you've not seen, like, I live in a different country. So like, if you and I were to like go get a beer right now somewhere together in real life, then nothing is going to replicate just being one-on-one, no telephones, being able to concentrate on each other. But then I wonder if that's this thing I value, like, is a kid that's 10, 11, 12, 16, like in Conrad's case, are they going to appreciate it in the same way because they've not grown up with that as normality? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, if you're grown up, if you are raised in a culture where virtual is normal, then it almost becomes the flip. Then normal in person becomes the weird one, not the rule.
It makes me
Does that
wonder.
make sense? I'm kind of rambling.
It absolutely makes sense. And it kind of shifted my perception right now, because I do have a son who's just about to turn 10 and is in that pivotal social development of his life. And he is completely virtual because we're in the middle of this shelter in place stuff. And I wonder, when they become anti-authoritarian at 13 to 17, if they're going to start pressing vinyl records and start punk shows, and it's going to go back to everything we loved about a kid because they can't do it now. Everything old is new again.
Yeah, I mean, I had that same conversation with somebody else not too long ago. It's like, we're so worried, like, how are kids going to do socially? They can't do these things. Like, do you remember what we were all talking about our kids over a year ago? Like, these kids don't play outside. They're always inside the house playing video games. They don't see their friends. They just Snapchat them. And these kids have been training for the pandemic the whole time. They're fine. True. We're the ones who have the biggest problem. Like, how could you not be social and outside with your friends? We said that a year ago, right? And now we're like, yeah, don't go outside and hang with your friends. I'm so worried about you. Maybe you should go back to school. They're like, no, we're good.
Do you know this is a different podcast altogether, but a girl that works for my husband was saying to him, she has 4 kids, which is bananas, but she was saying to him that since the pandemic, basically, and they live in like a little beach town, she will just pack the kids, it's summertime, obviously. She'll pack the kids a lunch at the beginning of the day, and then they just go off. They live in like a cul-de-sac. They'll just go off with the other kids in the neighborhood, and they'll come back at dinner time. And she was saying how nice it is not to be like, I'm taking Johnny to baseball, and then I'm taking Sue to piano. And like, they're not rushing around. They're just out doing stuff. And I think we live in this time of fear, like, are there really more pedophiles now than there were when we were growing up? Probably not, but we're more fearful now than we ever have been before, And I think that that's a major shift, whether that's online, whether that's real or imagined. The fear, I think, is allows people to also stay inside, if that makes sense. I don't know. I'm kind of random on that. I mean, to me, let me tell you guys this one other story, then I'll stop with this. There was this park where I grew up, and there was this vintage locomotive in the park, and there were swings and slides and other things. And as a kid, we could climb on the engine and like run around on the engine and like play with the different moving parts on the engine. And when I went home to Santa Cruz last year, the same train is still there, but they have a large fence around it, so you can't go to it. You can't go up to it. It's a health and safety hazard. And to me, that's the world we're living in a snapshot. It's like you can look at things, but everything is dangerous, and to explore, to fail, to get hurt, that is framed as the worst possible thing that could happen to you. So it's better to look and not actually try. It's better to not fail. And that to me is a real loss in anything. And I think the disposability that we're talking about of the not physical world somehow ties into that, but I'm not exactly sure how.
Wow.
Sorry.
Well, no, wow. That was great. So Jen, you're doing your own podcast coming up here soon, right?
Oh my gosh, you're so kind to remember that. Yeah, one of my good friends, he is the editor-in-chief of the Santa Cruz Good Times, which is the free art paper in Santa Cruz, California. Yeah. We're starting our own podcast, and it's called Songs That Saved Your Life. It's not debuting until Do you like that?
Yeah.
It's not debuting until January 2021, but the format is that we have different friends of ours come on, or people we admire because we're both huge super fans and super geeks that way. We have different people come on, and they each tell us 3 songs that meant a lot to them and really kind of help them at pivotal moments in their life. And then they kind of talk about whatever project they're working on. And then because Steve and I are such nerds, after the interview, because we will trade off doing the interviews with people, after the interviews, and he and I will just nerd out about how much we love the person or memories about that person. So far we have John Waters, Peter Hook from New Order / Joy Division, Will Sargent from Echo and the Bunnymen, Parker Posey, the actress. Who else do we have?
Wow.
Lars Ulrich. So we have some good people already that are in the mix. We just need to get our act together and put it all together.
I cannot wait. And when that comes out, I'll have to have you come on again to talk about the nature of moving into a cloud-based format like a podcast for you from books, so we can hype that up again. And once again, your book is titled Why Vinyl Matters, and where can people get that?
You can get it, of course, I prefer you get it at a fine physical bookstore, but Amazon also carries it. So thank you so much, Sean, for that plug. I appreciate it.
Oh, I have to. This book is great. You are great. As I said at the beginning, you are one of the smartest, coolest people I know. It has been a pleasure getting to catch up with you again and also explore the impacts that the cloud and vinyl and every technology of our life has had on our lifestyles and where we're going. So thank you again, Jen. It's been great.
And then that was great. It was really good talking with you. Thank you so much for being a part of it. And
thank you, Conrad.
Sometime in the future, maybe I get to meet you in person. Now I've seen your book. Now I got to go get one. So it looks really cool.
Thank you so much for having me, and take care.
Holy smokes, here comes some really bad tech jokes.
All right, Conrad, be funny. Tell me a joke.
A joke? Do you want a good one?
No, this is bad tech jokes. I want one that makes me sick.
Yeah. I don't know why they call it Zoom meetings. It should be called COVID.
Oh, that's bad.
That was pretty bad. It is topical though. It is kind of now.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole thing with like Zoom and Teams, everybody's having these virtual happy hours. And there have been a few moments where, when the happy hour ends, we've all had a few drinks, we're feeling good. But you know what? Last week, for the first time, my computer got drunk during the happy hour. You know how?
How?
Taking screenshots.
Okay. No, that one's actually funny. That's good.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for listening in. Once again, we're here every week for the Clearly Cloud podcast. Give us a like and follow if you're watching on YouTube. Please subscribe on any of the places where you listen to podcasts. And if you do want to give us feedback or ask us questions, or maybe even be a guest, send me an email at sean.s@agilit.com, and I'd love to talk to you. Thanks again, and have a great week.
Somewhere out inside